Aaron never planned on touching the old piano again. The thing sat in the living room like a quiet ghost, collecting dust in the corners and memories in the cracks. Most days, he'd pass by it without even glancing, pretending it meant nothing, pretending it didn't hold the last piece of a life he'd lost. He had a soft, tired face, the kind that carried years of just trying his best. His daughter Myra sat cross-legged on the floor, drawing crooked stars on cheap paper, humming without any real tune. It was an ordinary evening, just like any other, until something inside Aaron shifted. It was a small ache, pushing its way up like a forgotten voice, tapping on his ribs. Before he even understood why, he found himself sitting down at the piano. His fingers hovered over the keys, trembling just a little. For a moment, he just breathed, remembering a girl with gentle eyes and a laugh that felt like summer. He remembered the song he wrote for her, the one she loved so much, she made him promise never to forget it. He'd broken many promises without meaning to, but this one never really left him. When he finally pressed the first key, the room almost seemed to lean forward. Listening, the melody drifted out, slow and soft, the kind of tune that feels like a heartbeat trying to heal itself. Myra stopped coloring, her head lifted slightly, her small face looking dreamy, even while half asleep. Across town, Lena stood on the balcony of a high-class restaurant. Her dress shimmered under the warm lights, and the guests around her were laughing, clinking their glasses together. She smiled on cue, but her mind was somewhere else, somewhere far more quiet. She carried her success like a beautiful, golden cage, looking flawless on the outside while holding years of regret just beneath the surface. Then, a faint melody brushed past her ears. Her entire body froze. It was impossible, but it was real. It was the same melody she once heard under a dim street lamp back when she was young and broke and completely in love. It was the same melody Aaron played the night she knew, without a doubt, that she would always love him. The same melody she had forced herself to forget for so long. Her breath shook. She turned toward the street, as though the wind itself had called her name. Her heart stumbled, and memories rushed through her like a sudden storm. She gripped the cold metal railing of the balcony, trying not to cry, trying to keep her elegant mask from cracking. But the song kept floating toward her, whispering her past right back into her chest. And in that one moment, Lena knew the world had just shifted. She didn't know how or why, but the life she had built so carefully around her was about to change. She looked out over the city lights, the music pulling at something deep inside her, something she thought was long gone. She had to find him. She had to know if it was really him. Leaving her drink on the table, she walked away from the party, away from the glittering facade of her life, and stepped out into the night, following the ghost of a song. Back in his quiet living room, Aaron closed his eyes, lost in the music. Each note was a memory, a moment relived. He remembered their first date, a walk in the park where it started to rain, and they'd sheltered under a big oak tree, laughing. He remembered the night he proposed, not with a fancy ring, but with this song, poured straight from his heart. The melody swelled, filled with all the love and loss, all the joy and the pain. He didn't know that miles away, the song was acting like a beacon, calling the one person he thought he'd lost, forever, back to him. He was just a man playing a piano, trying to remember, but sometimes, remembering is the most powerful magic of all. Myra had fallen asleep on the rug, her crayon still held loosely in her hand. The music softened, becoming a gentle lullaby. Aaron played the final notes, letting them hang in the air like dust motes in a sunbeam. The silence that followed wasn't empty anymore. It felt hopeful. He looked at his daughter, then at the piano, and a small, genuine smile touched his lips for the first time in years. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. He didn't know that a woman was at that very moment walking through the city streets, her heart pounding with a desperate hope, guided only by the echo of his music. All Aaron knew was that for the first time, he felt a little less broken, and as the last note faded, a new story was just beginning. Lena stood on the worn doorstep, her breath a white puff in the cold night air. The city lights blurred behind her, a hazy backdrop that made her seem smaller, more vulnerable than the powerful woman everyone knew. She wasn't sure why she had followed the melody, why she had abandoned the warmth of the restaurant and the chatter of the crowd. She only knew the song had found her, a ghost from her past, and she could not resist its pull to this modest apartment on the city's east side. The door creaked open, and Aaron's first instinct was to protect Myra. The little girl stirred on the couch, rubbing her eyes sleepily. He frowned, his gaze falling on Lena's face, a phantom from a life he'd left behind. Shock froze him for a beat, but the father in him took over. He gently covered his daughter with a blanket, ushering her back into a peaceful sleep. Her soft snores filled the room, a gentle rhythmic drum against the sudden tension. Lena stepped inside, her movements hesitant, as if she were approaching a memory she wasn't ready to confront. Her eyes scanned the small apartment, the scattered papers, the faded photos on the wall, and then they landed on the piano. The old keys seemed to glow in the dim light, as if they had been waiting just for her. She remembered every moment spent beside that instrument. Every laugh, every shared secret, every promise she had failed to keep. Aaron's throat was dry. Words failed him. His hands ached to move toward the keys, to let the music speak for him, but he hesitated. He wasn't sure he was ready for her to see him like this, the same man, with the same scars, carrying the same quiet guilt in his chest after all these years. Lena's voice finally broke the silence. "You played it again," she whispered. It wasn't a question, but a confession, a recognition of the pain, the love, and the 16 years that had stretched between them like an ocean. Aaron swallowed hard, his own words catching in his throat. "I didn't mean to," he started, then faltered. "I didn't know you would hear." Then, the truth, raw and simple. "I never stopped thinking about you." Aaron could only nod slowly, every word feeling clumsy and inadequate compared to the melody that had just poured out his soul. The air in the room was thick, humming with memories both sweet and bitter. Myra slept on, blissfully unaware of the storm gathering in her small world of crayons and blankets. Aaron finally moved, sitting down at the piano. His fingers hovered over the keys, not yet playing, just feeling their familiar shape. He looked at Lena, searching her eyes for some sign, some permission, some bridge to connect the 16 years of silence that separated them. Lena took a hesitant step closer. Her eyes glimmered with unshed tears, reflecting the moonlight filtering through the window. She was still the woman he remembered, but different, stronger, harder, yet with a familiar fragility just beneath the surface. As she watched him, she remembered the boy he used to be. Her first love, the one who had loved her quietly without expectation, the one whose song had been a silent companion through her darkest nights. Then, he began to play. The first notes trembled in the air, fragile promises made long ago. They were soft, hesitant, unsure, just like he was. Just like they had been when they were young and the world felt infinite. Each note seemed to reach back into the past, pulling memories into the present, into a room where only music could speak the truth. The melody was beautiful, not polished or perfect, but achingly human. Every imperfection held a story, a shard of pain, a piece of longing, a whisper of love that had never died. Lena froze, unable to move. She could only stand there and let the music wash over her, a tidal wave of emotion. Her chest ached, and tears finally fell, streaming freely down her face. The song was hers, yet not hers. It was a living thing, resurrected by the hands of the man who had silently written it for her, over and over, for 16 years. Aaron's eyes were closed. He played not just for Lena, but for Myra, for himself, for the ghosts of a past that had never truly let him rest. He let the music speak the words he could not, the confessions he couldn't voice. He played the love he had carried in silence, the sorrow he had shouldered in the shadows, and the hope he had never dared to imagine. The final note lingered in the room like a sigh, a heartbeat that refused to end. Lena stepped forward, slowly, until she was standing right behind him. Her hand hovered for a moment over the piano, as if needing to touch something solid to know this moment was real. Aaron opened his eyes and looked at her. He said nothing, only nodded, an acknowledgement of everything and nothing all at once. Lena's hand found his shoulder, a light, hesitant touch that spoke more than words ever could. The moment hung in the air, thick with everything unsaid, everything lost, and everything newly found. Myra stirred in her sleep, mumbling softly as she clutched her blanket. A peaceful anchor in the adult storm unfolding around her. Lena whispered again, her voice thick with emotion. "I never thought I'd hear that again." And then, the words she had held back for 16 years spilled out. "I never stopped caring. I never stopped wondering about you. I never stopped." Aaron looked at her, a small laugh escaping him, a sound full of disbelief, relief, and sorrow all mixed together. "We never stopped," Lena said softly, finishing the thought for both of them. "We never really stopped." As the last echo of the music faded, Lena knew this was only the beginning. The melody had reopened a door that had been locked for far too long. Stepping through it would change everything. Their lives, their futures, were now an unwritten song, waiting for a new melody to begin. The night air outside was crisp, but inside Aaron's apartment, it felt as though the world had slowed. Time seemed to fold in on itself, leaving only the soft hum of the city and the lingering echo of the piano. The melody had left a trace in Lena's chest, a trembling ache that would not be ignored. She couldn't leave. She couldn't step back into the carefully controlled life she had built, the life where she was untouchable, untangled, untethered. Aaron watched her carefully. He was tired and wary of hope, but something in her presence stirred the memories he had long buried. The laughter, the stolen glances, the quiet nights by the piano where they had shared their dreams and their fears. He remembered the light in her eyes, the way she had once believed in a future they could not yet reach. "I have to know," he said finally, his voice low and uncertain. "Why are you here?" Lena swallowed hard. The words felt heavy on her tongue, but the truth had been waiting 16 years to be spoken. "I heard the melody," she said softly, "carried by the wind across the city. I had to follow it. I had to see if it was real." Aaron's heart clenched. He had played it for Myra, but he had not expected it to travel so far. He had not expected Lena to hear it. Not here, not now, not like this. He motioned for her to sit down at the edge of the couch, careful not to disturb Myra, who had settled back into sleep. Her eyes stayed fixed on him, though her hands twitching nervously in her lap. The room fell silent, except for the faint hum of city life outside and the soft ticking of the old wall clock. They had not spoken of each other in years. Not since the accident, the heartbreak, the unspoken choices that had driven them apart. Yet the music had done what words could not. It had bridged the distance of time and memory. Aaron leaned back slightly on the piano bench, his fingers brushing the keys as if testing whether the world still remembered his touch. The scars on his hands showed faintly in the warm lamplight, a reminder of the years spent hiding behind work, behind routine, behind a life built from fragments. He had learned to fix things others had broken, to hold together what could not hold itself. Lena watched him silently. Her chest ached with a mixture of longing and regret. She wanted to reach out but feared shattering the fragile peace between them. She wanted to ask why he had never come looking, why he had allowed the years to pass in silence, yet she knew the answer already. Some things were too heavy, too delicate to be forced into words. I need to hear the rest, she said finally, almost a whisper. It's not fair, she added. The melody was unfinished, incomplete, as if the story had paused, waiting for them to continue. Aaron hesitated. His fingers hovered over the keys again, and then, slowly, he began to play. The song rose softly at first, each note trembling with the weight of memory. Each chord carried the ghost of laughter and tears. The melody wove through the room, bringing with it the scent of summer nights, of quiet confessions, of promises whispered into the dark. It spoke of everything they had lost, and everything they had never dared to grasp. Lena closed her eyes as the music wrapped around her. She could feel the emotion in each phrase, the tenderness, the sorrow, the hope. Aaron had never needed to speak. He had only needed to play, and the truth was there in every note. The song was more than music. It was a confession. It was an apology. It was love. Myra shifted in her sleep once or twice but did not wake. She was the silent witness to the reunion unfolding in the room, her small presence grounding them in the reality of the moment. Lena opened her eyes to look at Aaron. She could see the faint quiver of his hands, the set of his shoulders, the way he had carried himself through years of quiet suffering. "Why did you leave?" he asked softly. She looked at him, and for a moment, the words caught in her throat. "I had to," she said finally. "My world fell apart, and I thought I was protecting you from it. From me, from all the things I couldn't fix. But every day, I thought of you, and of what we were meant to have. And I hated myself for walking away." Tears formed in Lena's eyes. She reached out carefully, brushing a loose strand of hair from his face. "I never stopped thinking about you," she admitted softly. "My life was full of everything, and yet empty without you. We were both too afraid to say the things we needed to say." The music slowed and softened as the song neared its quiet close. Each note lingered like a sigh of release. Aaron finally lifted his hands from the keys, and the room felt impossibly still, as though the piano itself had held its breath, waiting for them to decide the next step. Lena stood then, slowly moving toward him. Her hand reached for his, and for a moment, they simply held each other, neither speaking nor moving, but feeling the weight of the years fall away in that simple touch. The city hummed beyond the walls, but inside their small apartment, it felt as though the world had been made new. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'm here, and I am not leaving." Aaron nodded slowly, his heart a strange mixture of relief and disbelief. "You're real," he said finally. "Yes," she replied softly, "I'm real." And for the first time in years, the music was not just a memory, it was alive. But just as the quiet settled, a sudden sound echoed from the hall. A knock on the door, sharp, insistent, and unexpected. And in that moment, Aaron and Lena realized that the past they thought was behind them was far from finished. And what came next would test everything they thought they knew about love, forgiveness, and courage. The sharp, sudden knock on the door startled Mira awake. She rubbed her eyes, a soft yawn escaping her lips as she blinked sleepily. Seeing his daughter's unease, Aaron was by her side in an instant, gathering her small, nervous body into his arms to calm her. Lena stepped back slightly, allowing him to shield Mira, but her own eyes never left the door. It was as if she knew, deep down, that the person on the other side was about to change everything. Aaron opened the door cautiously, his hand still on Myra's back. He froze. The figure standing in the hallway was tall, familiar, and impossibly commanding. It was George Whitmore, Lena's father, the man whose shadow had loomed over her entire life. His expression was as cold and sharp as ever, his gray hair slicked back perfectly, his eyes cut straight through the small apartment, as if measuring every single flaw. George's gaze landed on Aaron, and he made no effort to hide the disdain dripping from his voice. "So, this is him," he said slowly, each word a carefully placed jab. "The man who has so captivated my daughter. The janitor who thinks he can play at our level, who dares to touch the world we control." Aaron swallowed hard, the words hitting him like a physical blow. Mira clung to his side, her small face silently observing him, her big eyes wide. He tried to meet George's gaze but found it impossible. The man's presence was overwhelming, carrying the weight of years of judgment and a kind of power that made people instinctively shrink. But Lena didn't shrink. She stepped forward, her posture firm, placing herself between Aaron and the oncoming storm. "You will not speak to him that way," she said. her voice quiet but carrying a steely edge that made even George falter for a fraction of a second. I decide who is in my life. I decide who I care for, and you will not interfere. A slight, condescending smirk curled George's lips. You always were headstrong, he said, dismissing her defiance. But being headstrong doesn't erase mistakes. Or the past, or the blood that has been spilled to maintain your place in this world. I will not allow you to make a fool of yourself, of our family, over some nobody. Aaron shifted instinctively, pulling Mira even closer, shielding her small body with his own. He didn't speak, but his hands clenched into tight fists at his sides, his jaw set. The room, which had always felt cozy, now seemed impossibly small, crushed by the suffocating tension. Lena's voice cut through it like a blade. This is not a mistake, she declared, her eyes blazing with a fire George hadn't seen in years. You may have ruled boardrooms and bent corporations to your will, but you will not dictate who I choose to love or how I choose to live. You will leave him alone. George let out a soft laugh, a sound utterly devoid of warmth or humor. You think you're in charge now? He scoffed. You've learned nothing of the world if you believe love can override power, influence, reputation. The man standing here is nothing, and I will remind you of that. Lena's hands trembled slightly, a telltale sign of the internal battle she was fighting, but she forced herself to remain still. You will not speak to him again, she said softly, yet each word carried the weight of a final judgment. Her gaze flicked to Aaron, then to Mira, and back to her father. You have no authority here. I am not a child, and neither is he. At the mention of his name, Aaron lowered himself slightly to Mira's level. He gently brushed her hair back from her eyes. It was the first time he'd truly noticed her expression amidst the chaos, anxious and wide-eyed. Yes, but also trusting. She didn't understand the words, but she felt the energy, the threat, the unspoken danger swirling around them. George's face darkened, his patience finally snapping. He leaned closer to Lena, his voice dropping to a cold, menacing whisper. You are making a grave mistake. Do not let sentiment cloud your judgment. Do not let your emotions destroy everything I built for you, for this company, for this family. That's when Aaron's voice finally broke the silence. It was calm, but firm. Enough, he said quietly. The single word hung in the air, stopping George in his tracks. You will not threaten us. You lost your right to dictate her life, or mine, a long time ago. And if you come any closer, you will find I am more capable than you imagine. George paused. His lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line as his narrowed eyes darted between Aaron and Lena. He seemed to be weighing his options, calculating his next move. Then, he took a slow, deliberate step back. Lena relaxed, just a fraction, though her body remained tense, her hand hovering over Aaron's arm, ready to act. The room was quiet for a long, heavy moment. The only sound was Myra's soft, even breathing. Finally, without another word, George turned sharply and left, his footsteps echoing down the hall. His presence lingered like smoke, but the immediate threat had passed. Aaron sank onto the couch, the strength leaving his legs. Myra immediately climbed into his lap, and he held her close, her small fingers clutching at his shirt. His heart was still pounding from the confrontation. Lena sat beside them, her hand resting gently on Aaron's shoulder, her thumb brushing soothingly along his arm. They didn't speak right away. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, but it was heavy with everything left unsaid, with everything that had waited 16 long years to be confronted. Finally, Lena's soft voice broke the quiet. I'm sorry, she whispered. For everything, for all the years. For letting fear control me. Aaron looked at her, his eyes tired but honest. It's not too late, he said quietly. It's never too late, as long as we're willing to try. Just then, Mira yawned, her small body finally relaxed in the safety of Aaron's arms. I want cookies, she said sleepily. I want cookies and hot chocolate. A soft laugh escaped Aaron's lips, and he kissed her forehead. That, he said, is easily arranged. Myra smiled slightly and closed her eyes, content. Lena watched them, a strange warmth spreading through her chest. The storm had passed. For now, but she knew this was just the beginning. More challenges were coming. More obstacles, more questions, more confrontations with a past that refused to stay buried. But for the first time in a very long time, she felt ready. She wouldn't have to face it alone, and neither would Aaron. As the night deepened and the city lights flickered through the window, a quiet thought crept into Lena's mind. The melody had brought them back together, but it hadn't answered everything, and she had a feeling that the past held secrets still waiting to surface, secrets that would test the bonds between them in ways neither of them were prepared for. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the blinds, painting golden stripes across Aaron's modest living room. Myra was already awake, tugging at her father's sleeve and pointing toward the small stack of pancakes he had made the night before. Her brown eyes sparkled with the unbridled joy only children seemed capable of possessing. Aaron ruffled her dark curls and laughed, the sound warm and full, carrying a sense of home. Lena watched them from the doorway, leaning lightly against the frame, a mug of coffee cradled in her hands. It struck her, watching the scene unfold, how normal it looked, how safe, how fleetingly peaceful. For years, she had associated this man with whispers, secrets, and the long shadow of the past. Now, she saw him with his daughter, the gentle, patient way he guided her through the pancakes, the soft reprimands when she tried to steal too much syrup, the way he laughed when she made a face that mirrored his own mischievous grin. It was a different Aaron, one no one else had ever seen, one only Myra had the privilege of knowing. Lena took a step forward, letting the floor creak under her weight. Aaron noticed her and offered a small, tentative smile. "Coffee?" she asked, raising her mug slightly. Aaron nodded, moving to hand Myra her plate before taking the seat across from Lena. The room felt intimate, in a way that Aaron hadn't allowed himself to experience in years. For a moment, they simply observed each other, the air charged with unspoken questions and memories that refused to be tamed. Finally, Lena spoke, her voice soft but steady. "I need to know everything," she said. "About the song, about what happened all those years ago." "No more secrets." Aaron's sigh was quiet but deliberate. "You're sure you want this?" he asked. "Once I start, there's no going back. You'll hear things about me, about the choices I made, things I can't undo." Lena met his gaze without flinching. "I need to know," she repeated. He nodded slowly and began his story, his voice low yet steady. "The truth is, after Leon, after everything that happened, I didn't know how to go back. My hands were broken, my career was over, and I didn't think I deserved to keep living the life I had dreamed of. I drifted from one job to another, keeping my head down, never daring to dream again. And then Myra came, and she changed everything. She reminded me what it meant to care, to protect, to love someone beyond ambition or success." Lena's throat tightened. "And the song?" she asked. Aaron's eyes softened, almost wistful. "Leon wrote the opening, the first 8 bars. Brilliant, as always. But he couldn't finish it. I was there that summer at camp, and I helped him complete it. When he died, I thought the song was lost forever. But I kept it, played it for Myra sometimes, hoping it might one day find its way to you." Lena's chest ached at his words. She had spent 16 years believing Leon's gift had died with him, that she would never hear it again. And now, here it was, alive in Aaron's hands, in his life, in his daughter. A gift from the past that had returned, insisting she pay attention, insisting she face the truth. They sat in silence for a moment, letting the weight of the confession settle between them. Myra stirred again, murmuring something about syrup before snuggling into Aaron's side. He kissed her forehead, and for a second, Lena was struck by the simple beauty of it, the small acts of care, the ordinary love that had somehow survived the years of absence and silence. But just as she allowed herself a moment of peace, the phone on the side table buzzed sharply, cutting through the quiet. Aaron glanced at it, frowning. He picked it up, and his expression immediately darkened. Lena saw the lines of worry etching themselves into his face before he spoke. "It's from the building management," he said slowly. "They say someone came by asking questions about me." Lena's heart skipped a beat. "Questions?" Aaron ran a hand over his face. "They didn't say much, just someone curious about my employment, my past. Maybe checking references." He looked at her, his eyes filled with a familiar dread. "It's not a coincidence. Someone's looking for me." The tension in the room shifted. What had seemed like a safe morning, a fragile bubble of warmth, now felt exposed and precarious. Lena's protective instincts surged. She moved closer to Aaron, lowering her voice. "Do you think it's him?" Aaron's jaw tightened. "Could be, or someone else connected to your family. George has ways of finding people, even those who try to stay hidden. We have to be careful." Myra, oblivious to the undercurrent of danger, tugged at Aaron's sleeve. "Daddy, can we go outside? I want to see the fountain." Aaron smiled weakly, ruffling her hair. "Of course, little one," he said. "But first, we need to make sure we're safe." Lena's eyes met his, unwavering and full of determination. "Then we face it together," she said. "No more running, no more hiding." Aaron nodded, feeling a strange mixture of fear and relief. For the first time, he didn't have to shoulder this alone. He had Lena now, and he had Myra, and somehow, that made him braver than he had been in years. As they prepared to step outside, the faint echo of piano music floated from the distant lobby below, carrying a hauntingly familiar melody. Lena's pulse quickened. The past was coming for them, relentless and impossible to ignore. And she knew that when it arrived, nothing would be the same again. The lobby was hushed, almost reverent, as the morning sun streamed through the tall windows, casting long, golden fingers across the marble floor. In the quiet, a faint sound began to surface, the delicate notes of a piano, a melody that hung in the air like a half-forgotten dream. It was a tune that carried a haunting familiarity, one that sent a shiver down Lena's spine. She froze at the top of the grand staircase, her heart catching in her throat. Down below, Aaron held their daughter, Myra, close to him, his body tense. The melody was unmistakable. It was Starlit Promise. After all this time, Aaron was playing again. He moved with a quiet, almost reluctant determination toward the grand piano. His fingers, scarred and hesitant, brushed the ivory keys lightly at first. Then, as if a dam had broken, his touch gained confidence. The notes began to swirl like smoke, filling the vast space of the lobby, the hall echoing with the weight of memories they carried. With every note, Lena felt her chest tighten, a mix of sorrow and a profound, aching joy. It was the song she knew so well, but it was different. It was fuller, more complete, as if the years of enforced silence had been gathering strength, just waiting for this one perfect moment to finally blossom. Myra clutched Aaron's sleeve, her small face a picture of quiet concentration. She watched the keys move under his hands, not fully understanding the history behind the music, but she felt its gravity. Her little heart seemed to beat in perfect rhythm with the melody, a primal, familiar pulse. Lena descended the stairs slowly, the soft click of her heels on the marble the only sound besides the music. She couldn't look away. Not from Aaron, not from the hauntingly beautiful music, not from the way the melody seemed to breathe life into the past and the present, weaving them together into a single, seamless tapestry. As the final resonant note lingered in the air, Aaron closed his eyes, taking a deep, shuddering breath. Mira, her voice a soft whisper, broke the spell. "Daddy, it was beautiful." Lena felt the sting of tears in her eyes, a wave of emotion so powerful it threatened to overwhelm her. She couldn't move, couldn't step forward just yet. The air was thick with anticipation, with unspoken questions, with years of pain and hope all culminating in this fragile moment. But the quiet was shattered by a sudden, jarring noise. The elevator doors slid open with a metallic hiss, and George Whitmore stepped out, his expression a thundercloud of fury and disbelief. His eyes locked onto Aaron. "So, this is where you hide," he said. His voice was calm, almost conversational, but each word was a leaden weight, heavy with menace and authority. "I see now. You think you can charm your way into my family, into my world." Aaron didn't flinch. His grip on Myra tightened just slightly, a protective instinct. He moved, placing himself squarely between his daughter and George. "You will not speak to us that way," he said, his voice low and steady, a growl rumbling beneath the surface. Lena finally forced her legs to move, stepping to stand beside Aaron. A united front. "I warned you," she said, her voice like ice. "The past cannot control us anymore. You will leave, now." George's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening into a hard line. "You always were defiant," he spat, his gaze fixed on Lena, and still so blind to the realities of this world. "This man is nothing. You don't know what you've brought into this home." Aaron's voice, though quiet, was infused with a strength Lena hadn't heard in years. "I may be nothing in your eyes," he said, his gaze unwavering, "but I am everything to her, and to her daughter. That is all that matters." Myra, sensing the rising tension, clung to Aaron, not understanding the words but feeling the cold fear that radiated from George. Her small hand reached out, her fingers finding and lacing with Lena's. Lena bent down slightly, brushing the hair back from Myra's forehead. "You are safe," she whispered, her voice a promise. A bitter, humorless laugh escaped George's lips. His gaze swept across the scene before him, the piano, the scattered sheet music, the small, undeniable traces of a family's warmth that he could never touch. "You think this little melody changes anything?" he sneered. "You think it erases the mistakes, the years of control, the power that built this family? I have seen it all, and I will not be ignored." Lena lifted her chin, her blue eyes steady and clear. "I am not afraid of you," she said, her voice ringing with newfound conviction. "And neither is he." Beside her, Aaron stood taller, his shoulders squared, a silent warrior ready for battle. George's lips pressed into a thin white line. His eyes flicked to Mira, who hugged her father's leg tightly, then back to the defiant pair standing before him. In that moment, he realized a stubborn, unassailable truth. This was no longer a game he could win. The pieces on the board had rearranged themselves, and he was no longer in control. For a long stretched-out moment, the three of them stood in a tense silence, the only sound the soft, rhythmic breathing of Myra and the faint hum of the piano, still resonating with the final note. Aaron's fingers brushed lightly across the keys, again, a soft, gentle reminder that beauty and courage could exist, could even flourish, in the face of suffocating power. Finally, George turned sharply on his heel and strode back toward the elevator without another word. His presence lingered like a shadow, a cold spot in the warm morning light, but the immediate threat had passed. Lena exhaled slowly, a breath she felt she'd been holding for days, her body relaxing for the first time since he'd reappeared in their lives. Aaron held Myra closer, feeling the warmth of her small body against his chest, a grounding, precious anchor. Myra's voice, sleepy and innocent, broke the quiet. "Daddy, can we play more?" she asked. Aaron laughed softly, a sound of pure, unadulterated relief. "Yes, little one," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "That is a promise." Lena moved closer, placing a hand on Aaron's shoulder. Her eyes met his, and in that shared glance, a quiet certainty passed between them. They had survived the storm of the morning. They would survive whatever came next, together. But as they left the grand lobby and stepped out into the soft, welcoming light of the city streets, Lena knew this wasn't the end. The past was not finished with them yet. That beautiful, haunting melody had opened a door, and the secrets that lay behind it had not yet been fully revealed. The next challenge was closer than they realized, lurking just around the corner. The evening air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine from the street trees nearby. I walked beside Aaron and Mira, my hand loosely clasped around his. The city had settled into its familiar evening routine, but our little world felt suspended, insulated from everything except the soft rhythm of Myra's small footsteps and the distant hum of traffic. Myra's head bobbed sleepily as she clutched her father's hand. Her voice was soft, but filled with a child's pure wonder. "Daddy, can we see the fountain now, please?" Aaron smiled, a tired but heartfelt expression, and his heart swelled. "Yes, little one," he said. "It'll be our little secret tonight." The fountain was tucked away in a quiet square, just a few blocks from Aaron's apartment. Lights glimmered off the water, creating a soft glow that reflected in Mira's wide, curious eyes. She ran ahead of us, twirling and laughing, the sound carrying a sense of pure freedom that neither Aaron nor I had heard in years. We followed her slowly, letting her explore, letting the precious moments stretch just a little longer before reality had to intrude again. Aaron kept one hand loosely over the piano case slung over his shoulder. It had been a gift from a colleague, a small but significant reminder that music was still part of his life, even if he rarely played in public anymore. I noticed his eyes lingering on the case, the way a painter might look at a long-forgotten canvas. A feeling tightened in my chest. He wants to play again. I realized he needs to. I had heard the music in the hotel lobby this morning, and it had stirred something deep inside my heart, something tender and unspoken that had been dormant for too long. We reached the fountain. Myra immediately started dancing around the water's edge, tossing imaginary coins and making wishes she didn't yet fully understand. The square was nearly empty, with just a few late evening walkers passing quietly on the sidewalk. The city lights reflected in the fountain's gentle ripples, like 1,000 tiny stars in motion. Aaron set the piano case down and unzipped it carefully. I watched him, every movement deliberate, almost reverent. He pulled the instrument out and assembled it quickly. The familiar ritual bringing back a flood of memories, long nights spent at music camp, endless hours of practice, and the silent promises we made to our younger selves. Myra perched on a small bench nearby, her eyes wide with anticipation. She had always been Aaron's most devoted audience, and now, in this private square, she felt like she was part of the music itself. Aaron sat down and ran his fingers lightly over the keys, just testing the sound. The first notes were tentative, soft, almost as if he was afraid to wake the past. I stepped closer, my heart tightening as the melody began to unfold. It was Starlit Promise. It began, so familiar, but with subtle differences. The ending was richer, fuller, as though the music itself had grown and matured with time. Each note carried a story, the ache of lost dreams, the warmth of quiet triumph, the unwavering devotion to a love that had been silent for 16 long years. I felt the weight of every emotion pressing against my chest. I realized I had been holding my breath the entire time, waiting for the song to finish but also dreading the moment it would end. Myra clapped her hands softly at the more playful passages, her innocent laughter spilling into the night like sunlight breaking through clouds. Aaron's hands moved with a fluid grace. They were scarred, but unbroken. Every motion was precise, deliberate, and full of life. The music was no longer just a memory. It was living, breathing proof that the past could be healed, that it could be transformed into something beautiful. When the last note finally lingered and faded into the night air, Aaron exhaled slowly, leaning back on the bench. Myra scrambled into his lap and hugged him tight. I felt tears slip down my cheeks. I had expected the music to move me, but not to overwhelm me with the absolute certainty that I wanted this man, this family, this life, beside him, more than anything. Aaron looked up and caught my gaze, his gray-green eyes steady and warm. "I never wanted to hide from you," he said quietly, "but some things are too fragile to force into the light until the time is right." I took a tentative step closer, then another. My hand found his, and I held it lightly, yet with purpose. The city, with all its noise and chaos, seemed to fall away, leaving just the three of us in this perfect moment of quiet triumph and fragile hope. But just as we began to breathe in relief, a distant sound shattered the calm. The sharp, distinct click of expensive shoes against pavement echoed from the alley across the square. I froze. I knew that sound. George Whitmore had not given up. The threat had followed us here. Aaron's jaw tightened. His hand instinctively gripped Mira's a little tighter. I moved closer, shielding my daughter's view from the street. We watched silently as a shadow appeared beneath the streetlight, the outline all too familiar and imposing. George stepped into the light. His expression was unreadable, but his presence was heavy with command. I whispered softly to Aaron, "We have to face him." The moment had come, whether we were ready for it or not. Aaron nodded slowly, letting Mira cling to him tightly. For 16 years, he had lived in the shadows of fear and regret. Now, he would confront the past, openly, with the woman he had loved silently for so long by his side. The fountain reflected the stars and the city lights, but tonight, they could not hide us from what was approaching. George Whitmore stepped closer, his shadow stretching long and dark over the fountain. His eyes were cold, unwavering, fixed on the small family before him. Aaron held his daughter, Mira, protectively, his hands firm on her small shoulders, yet his posture was calm. Beside them, the grand piano lay silent, a powerful witness to the tension that had suddenly gripped the quiet square. Lena shifted slightly, positioning herself in front of Aaron. Her body was steady, but she could feel her pulse racing, a frantic drum against her ribs. "You shouldn't have followed us," she said, her voice clear and surprisingly strong. "Your threats won't work here." George's lips twisted into a thin, cruel smile, a strange mix of amusement and disdain. "You still don't understand, do you?" he sneered, his voice a low growl. "Your little world of music and make-believe, it can't shield you from reality. I've built an empire, on order, on control. You can't just hide behind your pretty melodies and a child." Aaron straightened, his voice calm but carrying a weight of authority that stopped George mid-sentence. "You don't get to decide what's real anymore," he said, his gaze level. "You don't get to dictate who we are or how we live our lives. Our choices, our family, our love. None of it belongs to you." Mira, sensing the friction, tugged at Aaron's sleeve. Her small voice was a whisper in the tense air. "Daddy, why is that man so mad?" Lena immediately knelt beside the little girl, her expression softening as she brushed a stray curl from her face. "It's okay, sweetie," she whispered, her voice a soothing balm. "I will always protect you. And Daddy always will." George let out a sharp, humorless laugh that echoed unnervingly in the empty square. He fixed his gaze on Aaron, his eyes filled with open contempt. "You always were sentimental," he spat. "You truly think a song, a child, a woman, that any of it changes what is right? You can't rewrite history with a pretty tune." Aaron's jaw tightened, a muscle flexing in his cheek, but he refused to take the bait. He looked directly at George, his gray-green eyes steady and unflinching. "What's right isn't always dictated by money or power," he said softly, yet every word resonated with conviction. "Sometimes, it's defined by courage, by love, and by truth." Hearing the conviction in his voice, Lena felt her heart swell with pride. She took a small step forward, closing the gap to stand shoulder to shoulder with him, a united front. "You've already lost, George," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "The people you control, the fear you try to instill. None of it matters if we choose not to be afraid." For the briefest of moments, George's carefully constructed expression flickered. A tiny crack appeared in the armor of control he had worn for decades. His eyes darted to Myra, who clung to Aaron, her own eyes wide but surprisingly unafraid. Then his gaze shot back to Aaron and Lena, and a flicker of realization crossed his face. They weren't backing down. The strength in their quiet defiance, a force he had always dismissed as weakness, was now undeniable, palpable. For a long moment, silence descended upon the square. The only sounds were the gentle splashing of the fountain, its water glistening in the warm glow of the streetlights, and the distant, muted hum of the city, seemingly holding its breath. George took a slow, deliberate step back, his hands tightening into white-knuckled fists at his sides. "You may think you've won," he said finally, his voice laced with a new, chilling venom. "But remember this. Power never forgets, and neither do I." Aaron tightened his protective hold on Myra, his expression resolute. "You will not touch us," he declared, his voice ringing with finality. "We will not live in fear of you. And you can't take what we've built. You already missed your chance to be a part of this life." With a sharp, angry pivot, George turned and strode toward the street, his figure quickly swallowed by the encroaching shadows until he was gone. Lena exhaled a long, shuddering breath, feeling the tension finally begin to loosen its grip on her shoulders. She reached out for Aaron's hand, and he squeezed it gently, a silent reassurance. Myra leaned against her father, her small, warm presence grounding them both in the present moment, pulling them back from the precipice of fear. Aaron finally looked at Lena, a faint, weary smile brushing his lips. "The danger isn't over," he said softly. "But we faced it, together, and that is a strength he can never understand. Something more powerful than anything he could ever throw at us." Lena nodded, her eyes glimmering with unshed tears of relief and pride. "But not just us," she corrected gently, her gaze falling to their daughter. Mira giggled softly, a sound like tiny bells, and piped up, "Yes, Daddy, I'm strong, too." They returned to the piano, the polished wood cool beneath their hands. Aaron lifted Myra onto the bench, her little legs dangling far above the pedals. She watched, captivated, as his fingers found the keys. He began to play again, but this time the music was softer, more tender. The melody was a lullaby, a private song for their little family, weaving a cocoon of peace in the quiet of the night. Myra's small fingers reached out, hesitantly at first, to touch the ivory keys. Aaron gently guided her hand, showing her how to press a single key, then another, teaching her the first simple notes of her own song. Lena watched them, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. The crushing tension of the past few minutes, of the past few years, was finally giving way to a fragile, beautiful hope. The melody swelled, filling the square, carrying the complex story of their life's fear and courage, loss and love. the heavy weight of the past and the shimmering promise of a future they would build together. Every note seemed to push the lingering shadows further away. Every pause, every gentle keystroke, spoke of trust, devotion, and the profound power of hearts bound by love, not by fear. But as the final, resonant note drifted into the night air and faded into silence, Lena felt an involuntary shiver of caution. The past might have retreated for now, but it was never truly gone. George Whitmore's presence had left a mark, an unspoken warning that would linger long after his footsteps had faded. He would return. In some way, in some form, he would be back, and when he did, they would have to confront him again, fully and without hesitation. Yet, in that perfect, fleeting moment, with Myra finally asleep in Aaron's lap and the city lights reflecting like scattered diamonds in Lena's tearful eyes, they understood something vital. The next morning, the city felt quieter than usual, as if the night had carried away all the tension, leaving a fragile peace behind. Aaron and Lena walked Myra to school, hand in hand. The little girl skipped ahead now and then, her bright laughter floating like sunlight across the pavement. Lena glanced at Aaron, noticing the weariness etched under his eyes, but also the quiet strength that had carried them through the confrontation. He met her gaze and offered a small, reassuring smile. A silent promise passed between them. They had faced the shadows together, and they had survived. Back at the apartment, Aaron carefully unpacked his piano case, setting it on the stand by the window. Myra had left small, smudgy handprints on the glass from where she'd pressed her nose the night before. Watching the fountain below, he smiled faintly, tracing the faint outline with a finger. Music had always been his refuge, his escape, but now, it had become their bridge, the thing that connected them all. Lena stood behind him, watching his hands hover above the keys. He hesitated for just a moment, a flicker of doubt crossing his features before he began to play again. This time, the melody was gentler. Each note felt deliberate, yet warm, as though he was speaking directly to her through the sound. Myra's favorite song, Starlit Promise, flowed effortlessly from his fingers. It was the same piece that had once startled Ingrid Whitmore months ago, in what felt like another life entirely. Now, it seemed to belong completely to their family, a private anthem of their own. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, startling them both. Aaron paused the music. Myra perked up, her head tilting. Who could that be, Daddy? Lena exchanged a quick look with him and moved to answer the door. It was a young man holding a large, crisp envelope, neatly addressed to Aaron. Lena signed for it, her curiosity piqued, and the messenger left without a word. Aaron opened the envelope slowly. Inside were letters of introduction and a formal invitation to perform at a small but prestigious music hall. They had been sent by Corbin Hale, his old mentor, the one person who had always believed in him. Aaron's eyes filled with emotion. He turned to Lena and Myra, the papers trembling slightly in his hand. The music is calling me, he said softly, but this time, I'm not alone. I have both of you. I can do this. Myra ran to him, hugging his legs as tightly as her little arms could manage. Daddy, I want to come and watch, she exclaimed. He smiled down at her. Yes, little one, you will always be my first audience. Lena stepped closer, taking his hand and squeezing it firmly. You deserve this, she said, her voice full of conviction. You've lived in the shadows for far too long. It's time for the world to hear the music you were always meant to share. That evening, they arrived at the music hall. Myra clung to Aaron's hand, the excitement in the air almost tangible. On stage, Aaron adjusted the piano bench and set Myra beside him. She was small but steady, her wide eyes reflecting the warm lights above. The audience murmured softly, anticipating the performance, yet completely unaware of the long, winding story behind the music they were about to hear. Aaron began to play. It was Starlit Promise once more, but this time, it had a new ending. The melody had grown richer, fuller, cascading in waves of hope and quiet joy. It was no longer just about a past love, it was about a future found, about the family he now held so dear. The audience was captivated. Each note told a story of love, patience, and incredible courage. Myra watched her father intently, her small fingers tracing the air above the keys as if she could absorb every single emotion he poured into the music. Watching them from the wings, Lena felt tears spill down her cheeks. The sound of the piano filled every corner of the hall, and it also filled the broken corners of her heart, healing them piece by piece. When the final resonant note faded into silence, the applause was overwhelming. It rose in a thunderous wave, filling the entire space. Myra clapped enthusiastically, her face absolutely bright with pride. Aaron smiled at her, a genuine, unburdened smile, and lifted her onto his lap, hugging her close. The music had bridged the past and the present, and in doing so, it had carved a space for their family to finally exist freely, in the light. Backstage, Corbin Hale approached them, his own eyes glistening with tears. You've done it, he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. You have finally found your voice and shared it with the world. The legacy. It's yours to carry now. Aaron looked at Lena and Myra, his heart full. We have our music, our family, and our lives, he whispered, pulling them into a tight embrace. It is enough. But as the applause continued to echo through the hall, a lingering reminder of their triumph, Lena knew that life would not always be this simple. There would be more challenges, more setbacks, and more difficult choices to make down the road. For now, though, they allowed themselves to simply bask in the moment, in the music, in each other. The spring sun streamed through the large windows of their apartment, casting warm golden light across the piano. Aaron sat beside Mira, whose small fingers moved over the keys with growing confidence. Lena watched them both from the doorway, her heart full. She had never felt more at peace. Aaron played softly, a new melody, one that had no name yet but spoke of beginnings. The notes danced in the sunlight, gentle and unhurried, carrying with them the story of the past and the promise of the future. Myra laughed as she stumbled over a few keys. "Daddy, you missed a note," she said, smiling. "It's okay, little one. We're learning," he said softly, and guided her fingers again. Lena moved closer and placed her hand on Aaron's shoulder. "This is beautiful," she said. "You've given us all something priceless." Aaron looked at her and smiled, something deep and tender in his eyes. "Every note was a gift," he said. "And now, it belongs to all of us." Together, days passed into weeks, and their life settled into a rhythm that felt both ordinary and extraordinary. Mira attended her lessons at the community center, her world expanding with new friends and experiences. Aaron began teaching piano to a few children in the neighborhood, kids who reminded him so much of himself at that age, full of raw talent and a desperate need for encouragement. Lena continued her work, but with a lighter heart, knowing that love and family were the true measures of success. The pressures of her career no longer defined her. Instead, they were just one part of a much richer, more fulfilling life. One evening, as cherry blossoms drifted through the city park like soft pink snow, they sat on a bench watching Mira chase butterflies. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple. Aaron held Lena's hand, and she rested her head on his shoulder. The city hummed around them, but for once, it felt gentle and welcoming, like a backdrop to their quiet joy rather than a source of stress. "I've been thinking," she said softly, "about Starlit Promise. It had an ending before, but it feels different now, like it's still being written." Aaron nodded, his fingers entwining with hers. "Maybe," he said, "perhaps the best promises aren't the ones we make once and lock away. Perhaps they're the ones we remake every day, in 1,000 small ways." Just then, Mira ran back to them, her face flushed with excitement, her laughter bright and clear. "Daddy, Miss Lena, come see," she shouted, pointing toward the center of the park. "There's a pianist over there by the fountain. He's really good, but not as good as you." Aaron laughed, a warm, genuine sound that made Lena's heart swell. He pulled her to her feet. "Should we go listen?" he asked. "Absolutely," she said, smiling. Her hand found his as they walked toward the fountain, Myra skipping ahead, their laughter mingling with the soft evening wind. A young pianist, probably not much older than a teenager, played with enthusiasm. His notes were raw and pure, filled with a passion that hadn't yet been polished by years of formal training. Aaron watched him, and in the boy's focused expression, he saw a reflection of himself as a young man, full of dreams and driven by the music inside him. When the boy finished his piece, Aaron clapped loudly. "That was beautiful," he said, his voice full of sincerity. "Keep playing, even when it's hard. Even when people tell you you're not good enough. Keep playing." The boy beamed, his face lighting up with pride, and immediately launched into another song. Aaron slipped his arm around Lena, and she leaned into him. This was it. This simple, shared moment. Their family, complete. That night, after Myra had been tucked into bed, Aaron returned to the piano in the quiet living room. The moonlight cast long shadows across the floor. Lena sat beside him on the bench, resting her head on his shoulder. "Play me something new," she said. "Something that's just ours." Aaron's fingers hovered above the keys for a moment, and then he began a soft melody. It was tentative at first, like a question, but soon it blossomed into a complex and beautiful dance of notes. They moved together, father and daughter, husband and wife, creating something that was beautifully imperfect, yet perfect in its honesty. It was a song of their journey, of pain and healing, of loss and love found. When he finished, Lena's eyes glistened with tears. "What is it called?" she asked, her voice a whisper. "Second movement," he said softly, "because every great piece has more than one part. And this," he added, turning to look at her, his gaze gentle and sure, "this is just the beginning." She kissed him then, long and sure, a kiss that held all the promises they had ever made, and all the ones they had yet to make. "Promise, we'll keep writing this song together," she whispered against his lips. "That no matter what happens, we won't let the music stop. I promise," he said. And this time, there were no shadows, no ghosts from the past, only the pure, undeniable truth of their hearts. Outside, the city hummed its evening symphony, the sound of distant cars, the murmur of voices from the streets below, the soft rush of wind through the trees. But inside the apartment, there was only music. The kind that heals, the kind that saves, the kind that proves even the most broken things can be made beautiful again, if someone is brave enough to try. And for Aaron, Lena, and Mira, this was their song, their life, their promise. A melody that would continue to grow and change, a symphony written not on paper, but in the moments they shared, day after day. Thank you so much for listening. If this story touched your heart, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more content that celebrates the beauty of new beginnings. We'll see you in the next one.